Welcome to the Bike Life podcast by Warmshowers Foundation, where we will be sharing knowledge, experience, tools, and stories of touring cyclists and hosts from around the world. I'm Tovell, the woman behind the scenes at Warmshowers Foundation, the leading platform for cyclists looking for hosts and to connect with a passionate international community. Find out more by visiting us at Warmshowers.org. Now, on to the show.
Hey everyone, this is Jerry Kopak, the host of Bike Life, coming to you from the mountains of snowy Breckenridge, Colorado. Somebody asked me recently, what do you know about bicycle touring in Taiwan? And I thought to myself, not that much. Well, today's guest literally wrote the book on cycling in Taiwan, and he's going to share all the good details of what makes Taiwan a cycling paradise. Hey, Mark, welcome to Bike Life.
Hi, Jerry. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate you waking up early and talking to me today. What time is it there?
It's just gone 7 a.m. here in Taiwan.
All
it's
right.
fine. I'm awake.
Not so bad. So
No.
I'm curious, how'd you end up in Taiwan? Because your accent kind of indicates that maybe you're from someplace else.
Originally from the UK, I've been cycle touring for years. I just finished a long trip cycling from Alaska down to Panama, and I was back in England thinking about what my next trip would be, and I picked up a book by a Taiwanese author called The Stolen Bicycle. The author's name is Ming Yi, and yeah, the bike blew me away. The book blew me away. It told me all about this amazing island, just off of the coast of China. There was a cycling paradise and a bicycle mecca and all these beautiful mountains and ocean roads I'd never heard of. So I decided to come here and take a look for myself.
So you went there to visit. How long was your first trip?
Well, initially I arrived here to stay for a month, and then I liked it so much I decided to keep staying here, and I stayed here for, it was like 3 months of cycling around, and then I thought, well, let's stay here for a year, but then the pandemic hit. So then 3 months became 1 year, which became 2 or 3. And here we are 5 years later.
Wait, so let me get this straight. You went there on a whim because you read a book and got interested, visited, and then never left.
So far, yes, that's true. Except for other cycling trips to countries on my holidays. Yeah, that's it so far.
Does it feel like you are on holiday still, or does it feel like, okay, I actually live here now?
Oh no, it feels like I live here. I mean, Taiwan's one of those countries where you get settled and it becomes really wonderful, but you grow into living here. Initially you're very separate, but once you become part of the community, it feels very homely. So it's great.
Got it. Was there anything that, I don't know, felt different about actually living someplace as opposed to visiting? Because, when you're on holiday, everything is easy, everything is a vacation, that's fun. But when you're actually living someplace, maybe it feels a little bit different.
Yeah, in Taiwan, you got the language barrier. If you don't speak Mandarin as a first language or even as a second, that can feel a bit intimidating when you first come here. But actually, after a while, Taiwan's very welcoming, and there's a lot of English spoken on the island. And then if you spend a few months learning some Mandarin, you get by very quickly. But I would say that's the biggest difference, is just picking up some language.
Got it. And have you been picking it up?
It's
Enough.
Okay. Don't start speaking to me in Mandarin now. I'll show myself up.
I actually visited China up on the eastern Tibetan Plateau area a couple of years ago, and I don't speak any Mandarin, so the language barrier was intense, and there was, to my experience, not any English spoken. So it sounds like there is a decent amount of English spoken in Taiwan.
I think Taiwan's different from China in that regard. I mean, China, there's obviously areas where people do speak English, but in Taiwan, they tried to foster a greater communication and connection with, like America and Europe. And so they have all the road signs here in English, for example, and they have a dual language approach to life here. They're trying. I think it's a fairly new policy, but it certainly helps when you're riding around that you can read all the road signs and get yourself about. So
yeah, for sure. So as I mentioned, I've cycled through China, also places like Vietnam and Thailand, but somehow I've missed cycling in Taiwan. That's probably just me, but do you find that Taiwan seems to fly under the radar for cycling?
Sure. Yeah, I think it does. I mean, it did for me for a long time too, And I've been cycling in parts of Asia and Southeast Asia, and yeah, it never hit me on the map. And actually, since I've lived here and been hosting people through Warm Showers, I realized how many people, just don't hear of this island as a cycling destination. And it's certainly was growing before the pandemic started, but yeah, it's definitely off the map, I think.
Yeah. And the people that you do meet who are not native Taiwanese, where are they typically from? Are they
Ooh.
Westerners or Europeans?
It's a good question. I think a majority are Europeans.
Okay.
I've had a lot of Japanese people come through as well, and some Southeast Asian riders. But yeah, most people are coming through from Europe and North America.
You see many Americans?
A few, you guys venture over here. I'd
It's a
say
lot.
more Canadians, but yeah.
Really?
No,
You
we
think
do, we do get Americans. We do.
Canadians are maybe more travel more, I guess? I don't know.
Possibly, I'm not sure. I think it's the mountains. I mean, obviously in America you've got some great mountains, but I think it's we get a lot of people from Switzerland and that region
Yeah.
of Europe come because they like the climbing, and I think people that are used to climbing would have heard of Taiwan because there's some famous mountain races here that people have heard about, I think.
I'm so glad you brought this up because I was looking at a map of Taiwan recently, and it looks like the entire east side of the island is just one giant mountain.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
like many of the peaks rival what we have in the US and also in Europe with regards to altitude. So, what's it
it,
like cycling in those monsters?
it's really incredible because there's obviously lots of places in the world have high peaks, but to go from ocean to say 3,500, 3,600 meters above sea level in less than 100 kilometers of distance is really dramatic a change. And I live on the west side, which is a bit flatter, but even here, just a little bit in from the coast, and you're going up 1,000 meters from sea level straight away, which means you have really sharp switchback roads that head straight up into the hills, and it makes for really good exploring because you basically go from lowland cities straight to these kind of like tropical jungle mountains straight away, and then within 30, 40 kilometers you're above the tree line and you're in theory snow-capped peaks. So it's
So,
it's quite amazing.
when you say in theory, what do you mean?
Well, the snow levels dropped off in the last few years, so we don't
Ah,
have as much snow in the high peaks anymore. But the roads stay fairly open all year round, which is quite nice.
okay. So it's interesting you talk about the roads because I had an experience when I was cycling in Taiwan. I'm sorry, not Taiwan, but in Thailand. And the roads are immaculately manicured, not a grain of sand on them, but they're insanely steep. It's almost as if somebody forgot how to build switchbacks there. It's like cycling up an elevator shaft. So
Sure.
you mentioned the roads are steep there. Describe some of the
It's
roads.
in the main arteries that go up into the mountains, there's not that many in Taiwan, but the main roads that go up, their gradients are pretty good. Like, it doesn't average too much above 6 or 7%. But then as soon as you veer off those into the mountain farm roads, we're talking, yeah, 15, 20% grades all over the show. But the road quality is amazing in Taiwan. They have a big agricultural sector here that has the roads kind of kept nice and smooth for them. So you can kind of be in the smallest little winding mountain switchback road, and the tarmac will be nice and smooth. So actually, it's more the longevity of the climb rather than the steepness, I would say. Some of the main peaks here, I don't think really get above 7, 8%, but it's for 40, 50 kilometers of cycling straight up.
That sounds downright delightful because some of the
Yeah.
things I've cycled in Thailand were 10, 12, 15% grade. And
Mm.
it was relentless. So it sounds like 6, 7% is quite enjoyable.
It is really lovely. I mean, I'm sure if there's people listening to this that have cycled those mountains, they'll be screaming at this podcast because there are, of course, like the highest pass in Taiwan's Uling, and the main road up to there has some brutal 20% grades. But yeah, overall, I think it's manageable. It's just whether you're used to mountain riding or not, really.
So when you talk about cycling, you mentioned that great quality of roads. Is most of the cycling done there? Is it on nice new tarmac pavement, or are there ways to get off the road? Maybe some gravel roads, or maybe even single track for mountain bikes.
Yeah, there are. The mountain bike scene's burgeoning here, and it's kind of getting larger in the hills around the Taipei region. But it's mainly tarmac. There's a lot of road bike riders here. But yeah, like I said, once you get into the mountains and you get off the main road, you're in kind of broken concrete, gravel, some sandy routes. There's a few. They're quite good here at Taiwan at trying to open up the tourism industry, certainly domestically. And so there's plenty of trails that go to lakes and features in the mountains that are just sand tracks or gravel tracks, and there's multi-day rides you can do, things like that. So there's plenty to explore off the road.
So what about the traffic? Is it pretty cycling friendly? Because again, I keep going back to Thailand. Everyone there seems to be really courteous, rule followers. But you go to places, and like I've been in Vietnam, and it's kind of like a little bit of, some people call it chaos, but they would call it organized chaos to the trained eye. What's it like in Taiwan?
It's it's really great here because there's a large scooter culture, and so there's a lot of traffic lanes for scooters and bicycles in the city. It's fairly safe. In Taipei, there's a huge culture of riding the kind of shared bicycle scheme up there that gets used a lot. And then generally on the roads, the traffic's very calm and nice towards cyclists. Rather than getting shouted at, you get a lot of kind of spirited cheers from people as they drive past. There's a famous phrase in Mandarin, jayo, which means like keep going, and that gets shouted at you a lot by people here. It's a very friendly atmosphere between the cars and cyclists, generally speaking, I would say.
Was that one of the first words you learned in Mandarin?
I think it's the only word yeah, for the first 6 months it was anyway. But when I first rode around and people were shouting at me, I had no idea what they were saying. I thought they were maybe being aggressive. And then I had a local tell me, no, it means they're saying like, it literally means add oil. It means to, keep putting energy and keep going. So yeah, it's a lovely phrase for sure.
Add oil. I like that.
Yeah.
It's, the one expression or the one word that I learned that I heard so much when I was cycling in China was mayo, which simply meant no.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't hear that as much here in Taiwan. That's pretty good to not hear that, I think. It's a really beautiful community here in Taiwan, and people are very, very happy to meet people who come in, especially if you're riding a bicycle, right? Because when you're cycle touring, people are always quite amazed that you're getting about on your own wheels, and they're very happy to see people here. So it's very supportive on the road.
Yeah, I'm so happy to hear you say that, because that was also my experience traveling through Asia and Southeast Asia. There's so many beautiful aspects of that part of the world, but my favorite, I think, was the people, the culture, the communities. People were so friendly, so curious, so willing to help. Talk to me about that, the people in Taiwan.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very developed country, and on the west side of the island and around Taipei, you have a lot of people with a hustle bustle kind of life, but certainly on the East Coast, you go through some indigenous villages, you're rolling around the Pacific Highway that we have over here. People are very laid back, they're very friendly and welcoming. You'll be offered food on the roadside, sometimes fruit, sometimes bottles of water. When you get into communities, camping's quite comfortable here in Taiwan, and there's always a smile cracked towards you. You can have conversations very easily, even with a language barrier. People are very welcoming here. There's not much animosity on this place. So
good. I love hearing that.
Yeah.
So I want to pivot and dive into your book. What was the inspiration for writing it?
Well,
first time the name of it.
Oh, so the title of the book is Bicycle Touring Taiwan, Roads Above the Clouds. And it's part guide and just kind of part exploration of Taiwan itself. I got into writing it because during the pandemic, I had been trying to write a novel for a long time. It's an aspiration I had, and I was struggling with it. And I'd read a book by Murakami about his experience of running and writing at the same time. So I decided to apply that to cycling. So whenever I went for a long bike ride, I was trying to write at the same, not literally the same time, but when I would take breaks, I would try and write. And I thought I was writing this novel. And then after a while, I realized all I was really doing was just writing about the roads and the scenery that I'd seen around Taiwan. And so I decided to kind of keep going with that. And after a year or so of taking notes, I had multiple full journals of just sketches and notes of the island. So I decided to flush that out and use my drawings to illustrate, some of the landscapes and the routes we have here. And that just kind of grew and grew and grew until I realized what I had was so much information on the island that I'd been, almost on every road around here. So I thought, well, it's time to put it all together and to make something.
I love it. So is it geared towards single or multi-day rides or kind of both?
It's mainly geared towards multi-day. It kind of talks about when we talk about riding around Taiwan, we say Huan Dao, which means basically around the island. And the book is mainly geared about alternative ways to go around. There's a main route that the government has, like a bicycle route that they prescribe you to, and it goes from Taipei and it follows the western coast down to the bottom and up the east. And my book talks more about hitting some of the mountains and hilly areas in the west, hitting some of the more remote areas in the south, and alternative routes on the east coast.
Got it. And so you'd mentioned there's a strong road cycling culture. Does your book sort of direct the reader towards a road cycling adventures or gravel?
It tries to push people towards the more self-independent touring idea. So the idea that, hey, there's a lot of road connections in this area where you can go and explore that. The aim was not to, provide a complete map of the island. It was more about trying to get people off of the main routes that we have. And for road users in Taiwan, especially the Taiwanese, there's very famous, like well-trodden paths that people take. And the book is trying a little bit to push them, hey, why don't you take a right at this road and see where that takes you?
Got it.
Yeah.
No, I love that. So you talk about these multi-day trips. Is the intention for people to camp or to homestay with locals or small hotels or guest houses?
It's, Taiwan's a real mix, and they they certainly welcome wild camping's pretty okay here in Taiwan, I say. But the book is geared around the idea that you are self-sufficient, and you can, every location where I talk about going, you can either camp or find a guest house or a temple or a homestay that you can stay in. Taiwan's, got this huge mountain area, but it's not really a remote island because it's such a small space. So you'll always find a convenience store or a guest house relatively close to your location. So the book doesn't offer too many options, but it does kind of try to encourage you and give you confidence that you'll be able to find somewhere nice for the night, whatever your level of comfort requirements are. It's fairly easy here.
Do you think is it pretty easy to find homestays with locals?
Yeah, it really is. There's not as many.
That's always been one of my favorite experiences with traveling, is getting that local homestay experience.
Taiwan is really sweet because there's a huge culture of people opening their homes up and having them as homestays, especially in the remote mountain regions and on the East Coast, because you don't have really big cities. And so the only options is for really small hotel stays. And quite often they're just people's homes. They've converted a few bedrooms into places that you can stay for the night. They'll have homemade breakfasts and you'll meet the family that live there. And that's really common. And we don't have a huge Airbnb or system here. So it's largely just, little local homestays. And you can certainly rock up in most villages without any booking and find something for the night when it's not Chinese New Year. That's the one exception to the rule.
Yeah, I was looking on our Warm Showers map, and I think I counted maybe 10 Warm Showers hosts, and maybe that might just be the people who are active when at the time that I counted them. But have you found there's many Warm Showers opportunities?
There's not so many here in Taiwan. I would say certainly the biggest cities have at least one or two. But in the more remote areas, you won't find people. I think in Tainan, for example, at the moment, I'm the only host down here. There used to be a couple of us, but yeah, it's not so many. But again, it's a growing thing. Cycle touring is still quite a fairly new concept in Taiwan as a multi-day thing to do, and there's lots of temples that offer fairly cheap and free homestays. So I think traditionally it wasn't needed, but yeah, there's some people dotted around.
So you said temples offering lodging. What does that look like?
It's a smattering. There's some that are really big complexes that have monasteries and they'll have dormitories. But in the mountains, most of the village's main temple will have a small dormitory area. They're usually private rooms that are quite run down, but for the night, they're maybe less, around about $10 for a night. And they'll give you big, thick blankets and yeah, fairly quiet spaces to sleep. So they're pretty good.
You sound like maybe you've experienced some of those.
Yeah. My first time staying in a mountain temple it was just I arrived really late. I've been riding up the mountain all day. I thought I was going to stay in a hotel that was there, but it was already full. Or it was closed. I couldn't really tell actually. And so I asked a local and they pointed me in the direction of the local temple. And I got there and all the lights were off and there's no door to knock on. It's just like an open air temple. And I was walking around until eventually the caretaker saw me and yeah, straight away opened a room up for me. And it was really great. I was just the only person there for the night. So it was with a huge mountain views in front of me. So it was really good.
Give me an idea of, say, the local food cuisine.
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I'm largely vegetarian vegan, so I don't eat meat, but
Same.
meat's a bit, yeah, okay. Well, meat's a big thing here in Taiwan. I say that like it's like a lot of Asian countries, there's meat is a huge part of the culture, but at the same time, they have a lot of tofu in Taiwan. One of the more famous dishes here is stinky tofu, which is a love it or hate it type dish. But generally speaking, you can get around rice, vegetables, all grown here. There's lots of fruit in Taiwan. I never found it a problem. The biggest issue is really explaining in the language barrier that you don't eat meat. But generally speaking, there's lots of options. Bubble tea comes from Taiwan, so that's a huge deal here. You can't really roll through a village without there being at least 4 or 5 tea shops ready to offer you liters of sugary, milky tea, which is always good.
I just remember talking about food now. One of the other expressions that I learned while I was cycling through the Tibetan Plateau in China, and I'm going to mess up the pronunciation, but I remember buyaru, which means I don't want meat.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the things that I remember. So have you...
That's pretty good. Your Chinese is great.
Okay, yeah. Really?
No, but it's okay. I'm also, buyaro is pretty easy to say. I remember that, I guess. If you say that in Taiwan, that normally literally means you don't eat meat. If you're in a fish restaurant, it might still mean that you eat fish, but that'll get you pretty far. Yeah. Butsulo is pretty good to say as well. I don't know, in Taiwan, if you're stressed about Mandarin, you can usually say in English, and a lot of places on the island, they'll understand that you don't eat meat. So it's usually pretty good. The difficulty will be that if you have like a soup broth or something with already pre-cooked in meat, so your alternatives will be fried rice and those kind of dishes that you ask for. But Taiwan's full of what's great here is there's lots and lots of independent people that make their own little businesses, and so food is in abundance everywhere here. There's everything from chains to the little mum and pop making their little fried rice in the street corner.
What about spice? Because I also remember the expression "buyala" means I don't want spice or heat or something.
Yeah, Taiwan's not a massive spicy country. They're more into their sweetness here. You can find dishes here where they put sugar into their rice and vegetable dishes, for example. So it's not overly spicy, but they'll usually ask you if you want to add spice. And certainly with their breakfast come quite bland, and then there's an array of spicy sauces you can choose to add afterwards. So you're pretty good here if you're not a spice fan.
And of course, Google Translate, I'm sure, works relatively well.
Exceptionally well here. Yeah. It's a good tool for sure.
So I know that there's probably a preferred time of the year or season for people to come and pursue their cycling adventure in Taiwan. When is that?
Well, the shoulder seasons are always pretty good, like March, April, May, before the plum rains come. And then in the autumn, kind of September, October, November. Although, as we're experiencing this year, we have typhoons later and later in the year now, but they're usually just blowing over after a day or two. The winter's pretty good in Taiwan because, like I said, we don't have snow or any extreme weather, but it is cold in the mountains in the wintertime. And in the summer, we have extreme heat. So if you don't want to ride in 40-degree temperatures, I would avoid the main summer months. But actually, it's a bit of an all-year-round island, really. I quite like riding in the summer because you have really clear skies. You just have to manage the brutal heat, really. But, most cyclists come here October, November, and April. They're the main seasons, I would say.
Got it. And then
Just avoid Chinese New Year. Just don't come in Chinese New Year if you can avoid it.
Okay, for those who don't know, when is that?
Well, it does change every year, but it runs for a week or two, usually towards the end of January and the beginning of February is the main times that it falls. And the reason I say that isn't because it isn't lovely here then. It's just if you're cycle touring, it's really hard to get hostels and hotels because they're usually booked up, especially outside of the big cities, which is rare because the rest of the year it's the other way around. It's certainly more expensive to fly in and out of Taiwan in that period of time. But for the Taiwanese, it's only a 1 week holiday. So as long as you avoid flying in and out just before that week, should be okay.
Should be okay. Yeah. So I don't want you to give away anything here because I want people to buy your book, of course. So don't tell me your favorite, but tell me like maybe your third favorite ride or place to ride around the island.
Oh,
and why?
Well, I would say on the West Coast, people always ride, if they're following the government route, through the flat areas through the cities on the West Coast. And whilst they're quite nice cities, you're going through a lot of traffic lights and a lot of road traffic around. But on the hills, just the lower hills on Taiwan, there's some really beautiful roads through the tropical jungle. And there's a road in the Tainan region called the Coffee Road. And if you can find it, the Coffee Road is delightful. It starts in a hot spring town and it kind of undulates for about 30, 40 kilometers along the ridge line of a mountain. And it's absolutely stunning. You have coffee plantations and jungle all around you, very minimal traffic. You can have views of the mountain ranges and the plateau ahead of you. And and a lovely autumn day. It's nowhere better, really.
So you talk about jungles. What kind of wildlife have you seen?
Nothing huge here in Taiwan. We do have bears, but unlike Japan, you don't really see them. They're quite endangered here. So unless you're hiking the high mountains for years, you're unlikely to see a bear. But we have some small deer. There's a lot of snakes in Taiwan. We get some marmots and animals like that. They're all quite indigenous, like unique to Taiwan as an island, but nothing huge. There's a lot of butterflies and birds in Taiwan. A lot of migrating birds come through here, lots of different species. And the butterflies are everywhere most of the year. So it's pretty good.
So it sounds like you have a pretty wide array of...
And monkeys. Of course, we have monkeys.
Of course you have monkeys. How can you forget monkeys?
Yeah.
So it sounds like you got a pretty wide array of seasons. What kind of gear do you think people would need if they're going to plan a week or so tour of Taiwan?
I mean, I would definitely bring a very good rain jacket because we do all year round. You can have a really heavy week of rain. And if you're planning just a 2 or 3 week trip, a large part of that could be in rain. Same with your bags and your bike. Make sure you have at least one really waterproof bag because when it rains here, like a lot of tropical parts of Asia, you get just these all-day downpours that don't stop. But in terms of warmth, unless you're riding the really high peaks during a particular cold snap, you don't really need anything heavily for the cold weather. So you can kind of come along with maybe one sweater and a rain jacket and everything else for summer. It'll be fine all year round.
So do the high passes, you said they don't get much snow anymore, but do they still get down to that freezing point in temperature?
They get pretty close to it, especially if you're, the highest pass is just over 3,600 meters. And when you're going down from that pass, if it's raining in the winter, it'll be bitterly cold and you can get frostbite if you're not careful. So watch out for that. And the nights, and certainly the night times, if you're camping up there on top, which you can do, it gets to freezing point. Yeah.
Got it. This is all fantastic information, and I am so glad we talked because now this is absolutely on my radar. So we've talked about a lot of aspects of Taiwan, but give me your best reason why you think people should come and check this place out.
That's so hard to pick one thing because what's so great about Taiwan as an island is culturally and physically it has almost everything the world has, but all in one place. It's not necessarily the best at anything, but it just has an abundance of everything. So, if you like ocean riding and swimming in open ocean with beautiful clear waters with sea turtles and sharks, come to Taiwan. If you want to ride some of the highest, hardest peak roads in the world, come to Taiwan. And I think that's true of almost every aspect, really. There's not one single thing. But I will say that the people here are really wonderful. And obviously, everyone goes traveling and they'll say, oh, the people in that country are great. And it's just particularly true in Taiwan, I think, as a cyclist, because they're so warm and welcoming when they meet you that it just makes it so comfortable and joyous to be here, really.
Yeah, it sounds like you found a home.
Certainly for now, yeah. We'll see. I haven't cycled the whole world yet, so maybe come back later.
Well, Mark, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to share your stories about Taiwan. How can our listeners find you or grab a copy of your book?
That's a great question. Well, the book's available on Amazon and places like that, but you can also grab it on my website, which is addoilgo.com.
Add oil. I love that.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Jerry. It's been really fun to do this. I love warm showers, as I'm sure a lot of your guests do. And it's been a really special part of my cycle touring experience. So
Excellent. Well, thank you everyone who's been out there listening to my conversation with Mark Tovell. If you enjoy our show, give us a like, a share on your social channels, or just tell your friends. These stories hopefully will inspire you to set off on your own bicycle adventure and maybe make the world feel a little bit smaller, one pedal stroke at a time. My name is Jerry Kopak, and until next time, keep riding.
Thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed the show as much as we enjoyed making it. Wherever you are listening, please leave us a rating and a review, as it helps us reach more cyclists and hosts around the world. Visit us at Warmshowers.org to become a part of our community, or on Instagram at Warmshowers_org. If you would like to be a guest on the show or submit a question, please make sure to email us at podcast@warmshowers.org.